So here we are again, friends, our fireside chats. This is part two of today with me, Winder Lyons, and Sir Edward Stone. And this one is going to be about what I think is one of the most exciting products. They're all exciting products in the line, but this one just is so unusual that I think it was worthy of its own call, and it's called Super Greens Plus D. Now, there's a couple things about this. If you listen to some of the major medical people these days, like Dr. Perlmutter and these guys that are all over PBS talking about, in their view, as much as 80% of all of our illnesses and diseases can be tracked and traced directly back to gut health. And here we have what may well be the finest conglomerate, if you will, of pre and probiotics that we've ever seen. And I think it's it's kind of appropriate that we really focus on this in today's culture, where so much of what we do just destroys our gut flora. And I'm still amazed that there are people out there who don't even know that we have a gut flora or an intestinal biome and that it's important. So how would you like to begin this, what I consider really a key conversation?
Well, I think all your comments are spot on. It's interesting. I think I mentioned on our prior call, I recently had just quite a bit of travel through Southern California. Saw a lot of people. I probably saw during the course of the week 350 plus people on top of just general day-to-day people I saw. And very few people, if you mention the human biome, know what it is and don't really think about the fact that you have sort of this symbiotic relationship between your biome or microorganisms that live, sort of in your body, in your gut, and yourself. And in fact, for those that don't know the story, when they mapped the human genome, gosh, it's been 15 plus years ago, I guess now, one of the interesting things they discovered was that when they were checking DNA, only about 15% of the DNA they were checking from the human was actually human DNA. But 85% of that DNA was from microorganisms. And there's a few of you listening right now going, what the heck is he talking about? Because that doesn't make any sense to me. But the reality is, if you have yourself checked, whether we're describing body weight or other things, it's about 15% that's solid human and the other 85% are microorganisms. But you have such a relationship, right, that one can't really exist without the other. And where that really plays itself out for us is in our gut. So, we probably, most people, through the years, you hear about people that are struggling with yeast issues or yeast blooms, right? That's when you've got a bloom or a set of organisms that aren't healthy. And they're literally, when we talk about candida, things like that, literally wreaking havoc on the body. And the reason is because you need a good flora to act as your pharmacy, right? I mean, literally, body signals, it needs this, it needs that. It's really in the gut where most of those things wind up getting produced. Literally chemicals produced for your body to utilize for immune support, injury, whatever it happens to be, production of white blood cells, right? I mean, so it's your gut is a part of that active chemical process to keep you going. So once discovered, one of the things we're able to do is just identify that gut health is more than just what you're not eating. It's also what you are eating, because how the biome lives and what it lives off of is really slightly different than what we live off of. So for example, fermented foods, fibrous foods, plant fibers, those are things that really feed those microbiome or microorganisms in the gut that make up the biome. So little homework for anybody listening that doesn't know what this is, spend a little time with Google and educate yourself. There's actually a national biome database that people can send their samples off to and get back information on, your biome, but also contribute to the understanding of the biome, because there's a lot of people that believe some of the biggest breakthroughs in medical treatment, learning how to treat human beings and their chronic disease issues, particularly, those breakthroughs will come from understanding more about the gut and the biome. And I'm actually, kind of count myself in that camp of people that believe there's real breakthroughs there. And that really gets into more than anything, it gets into self-care, because you can make an active decision with the food choices you make and lifestyle issues about the health of this biome, right? And so we made Super Greens Plus D specifically for this issues. There's a lot of benefits that come from the use of the product, but sort of that hierarchy of things that we do, it's gut health and it's immune support. Because if you're supporting the health of a person's gut and you're providing immune support, you're doing a lot for that person, and their opportunities to be more healthy are just greater because you're sort of contributing to those issues. And so whether we're talking about the vitamin D, right? And this is not just your everyday vitamin D that people are encouraged to use. That's essentially a traditional, conventionally produced vitamin D that's most likely, and when I say most likely, probably 99.9% of the time, produced from the fatty substances that we remove from lamb's wool, utilizing various chemicals and then irradiate to produce essentially what is vitamin D3, which can be effective, but it's so inefficient in the body, it's not bioactive, that it takes an enormous amount to really produce the healthy levels of D that, from a scientific standpoint, that we know a person needs. And so here we use whole organic mushrooms. So that means all of those minerals and beta-glucans and just other wonderful micronutrients that we get from these healthy medicinal mushrooms that are raised properly, prepared properly. You get all of those plus the D. And in this case, it's D2. And we know D2 is just as effective as D3. And in fact, the nice thing is you don't need to take as much, right? And so 2,000 IUs of this vitamin D2 is quite incredible and effective in the body. And so most people that their doctor just gave them a prescription for a 50,000 IU tablet that they take every 10 days or some of those kinds, right? And that's just a lot for your body to have to deal with. And so you've got so much, you've got a cascade of nutrients to support the activity of the D here. Even if we made this just from the D Winder, it would be a special product. And so that's immune support, because we know D plays a critical role in the function of that. Then there's the minerals and nutrients, not just in the D, but the barley grass juice and the broccoli sprouts that you find in there. So you've got other ingredients that are not just providing the chlorophyll and the other greens materials, but they're providing other micronutrients that are going to support your immune system. Your immune system does need micronutrients. And when you have a diet made of principally ultra-processed fast food, you're not getting those micronutrients you need to support the immune system. Then, of course, all of these things contribute to colon health, even before we talk about the prebiotics and what they can do, whether it's a spore form or non-spore form. So there's just a lot of things there. The sulforaphane that you find in the broccoli sprouts, that's incredibly effective inside the gut. There's some research to suggest that sulforaphane has an anti-tumor quality. And so we know, just based upon degenerative diseases that people face, that's critical. So immune, digestion, and getting those sort of what we call the good bugs, right? Let's just refer to them that way, right? We tend to sort of just refer to them as probiotics, but they're really actually good bugs. They're things that work in harmony with our system. Each serving has more than 5 billion units of those good bacteria in a combination of spore form and non-spore former. For those that have heard me talk before, that's probably unusual to hear the term spore formers and non-spore formers. Most of what people see when they're buying a probiotic is they're utilizing a non-spore former. And the challenge is it's incredibly delicate. And so when a manufacturer makes a product and they want to advertise that it has 100 billion CFU or some of these really large sort of crazy sounding figures, that's because as soon as you use that and experiences the change in the pH and the heat of your gut, they die off. And so just minor amounts ever make it into your small and large intestine to populate and help drive out bad flora. By using the spore formers, they actually act a little bit like a battering ram. Maybe that's the way to think about it, and sort of pave the way for those non-spore formers to get in there and do their job. So it's wonderful. One of the things people don't necessarily think about when you think about the variety of strains that you would use for probiotics, not just the strains in terms of the spore form and non-spore formers, you need to make sure those strains are compatible as they're sort of fighting for space to thrive and grow inside the body. And so these are products tested. They put them in the test tube, make sure these things live well together, support the growth of one another. And so those good bugs are really critical. And all of that, the D, the broccoli sprouts, the florafane, the barley grass juice, all of those things, because they're raw in nature, are going to absorb being plant-based at a very, very high rate. Most of the time, we would refer to it as sort of being completely bioavailable. Well, most of the time, conventional supplements people use, if these things have an availability in the 10 to 15% range, that can be a real reach. And so people are spending all this money, and frankly, it's just wasted out. Really, it's not going anywhere. So these, chlorophyll-rich foods, the parsley, the spinach, the barley grass, they all work in synergy together, and it's unique. And I think for most people that have experienced any kind of digestive issues, any kind of gut issues, you try this product, life's going to change, and it's going to change pretty rapidly. You probably ate your way to that for the last 10 or 15, 20 years, and it probably doesn't take much more than about 10 days on this product to see a real sea change in how your gut's performing.
That's a lot of information in a short period of time. It boggles my mind that most vitamin D comes from lamb's wool. It might show up on a blood test, and it might show that it's in your bloodstream, so you're getting your, but you aren't. And, we don't just walk around chewing on lamb's wool for nutrition. So how's that a good idea?
Well, clearly we do not think it's a good idea, hence the company and starting this organization in 2012. Look, you're exactly right. You can make an argument that its chemical signature is exactly the same, but it's an isolate. And those other compounds that make something useful and recognized by the body, they're just simply absent. It's incomplete in that regard. And so, and the body generally reacts with inflammation to a substance that it doesn't recognize and mark up as food. And so that's one of the challenges that we see with the inefficiency of these isolated nutrients. That they've been around a long time. They're not going anywhere. But as a discerning consumer, we can think about the whole, and we can think about the bioavailability and just generally the wisdom of using things that are complete. I don't even think you have to be a scientist to sort of put together the pieces to say, you know what, this makes sense instead of in an isolate, right? Because those isolates, no matter what else is true, they're not bioactive. They're just simply that living stuff that's in food that contributes to our livelihood and our life and our life force. That life force that exists in foods is missing in these chemical substitutes. And so that's, I'm be honest with you, I've worked in the supplement industry for right at 30 years, but I'm really hypercritical of this direction, because I think we're shortchanging people on what they spend and the efforts they make when they're trying to bridge that gap with their diet.
Yeah, but they make a lot of money with that stuff.
They do, and I've been on the other side of it. I've done well financially, and I'm in a successful position because of what took place there. But it's one of those situations, Winder, that when you make it to Oz and you pull back the curtain and you see that it's not what you expected, if you don't make a different set of decisions, that's a challenge to me. And so when we were given an opportunity to make a different set of decisions, we did just that.
Well, I think it's really brilliant. I became really hyper aware of gut health back in 2001 when I contracted Lyme's disease up in New England. Now, up there at that time, it was chronic, and it was it was diagnosed quickly because they knew what to look for, and you can't have a blood test for that for weeks, but at the beginning the symptoms were such that the guy knew right what it was. And I'll never forget this guy. He said, I'm not a fan of antibiotics. They do so much harm to your body, but in this case it's appropriate. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to go out to a health food store and buy the strongest or the best probiotic that you can find. And every 2 hours after you take that antibiotic, take the probiotic, and it'll minimize the damage from that drug and help repopulate good stuff that's supposed to be there. That kind of brought it into focus for me.
Well, and that's rare advice. I mean, for most people, they're not getting that, hey, listen, we need to do this because it makes sense for your current acute condition and struggle, but here's what we do to rebuild. And there's a lot of times in conventional medicine, we got to tear something down to build it back up, right? I understand these dynamics, and I'm thankful for the crisis medicine or the critical medicine we have in this country. If I break my leg, if I get in an automobile accident, I'm quite happy that there's an emergency room.
Break your elbow.
Yeah, break my elbow. That has these practices, but that doesn't mean that after that treatment, we can't be smart about an anti-inflammatory diet or these other things to support the body holistically, not just with the scalpel, right? Or the prescription pad. And so it's too bad we don't have more people that are blending these ideas of Western and what we know as smart holistic medicine.
I think we're heading more in that direction because it's consumer based and people are demanding more and doctors are having to shift. And so, I think this is an amazing product. I've never seen anything quite like it that has, and we don't, some of these products I see have like you said, 50 billion of the units or whatever. And from what I'm getting from your conversation, it's like you send out the blockers and they create a hole in the line, and then you send in the good stuff, the running backs, and they score you're using a pretty lame analogy, but it gets the point across that you're setting up the turf to populate it with this good stuff. And you don't really need 50 billion units when you have something that's like this, that's so effective and so quickly. So it's pretty genius stuff in my view.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the numerous scientists that we worked on this formula with, all with different specialties in this regard. And so, I like your analogy. I mean, here's the bottom line. If we prepare the soil, so to speak, prepare the body, then more of the seed is going to be taken in, right? I mean, that's sort of the dynamic we're working with here. And so it makes sense to me, and to do it otherwise doesn't make sense, right? So you're talking about a product here that can support bones, immune system, colon health, digestive. There's nutrients there for the entire body, right? Not just the gut and the immune system. It's with the native plant-based enzymes that we include in there. You're talking about high absorption quality, feed that biome, help with the body's pH, right? Help with alkalinity and getting away from acidity. So it is a special product, and I'm incredibly proud to be able to work with it. And it's one that I've got it on my desk, and it just doesn't leave my sight, right? It's part of that air, water, food program I try to have every day to keep it all going.
If someone is in a deficit from having had a lot of antibiotics or trauma or drugs or any sort of thing that can damage the biome, should they take more at the beginning to help jumpstart the process?
That wouldn't be a bad idea, but in this case, instead of 3, more might mean 2 twice a day, because you can get to a point where there's a diminished return from what you're doing. There's no question in my mind that 100,000, 100 billion CFU, some of these crazy numbers you described, right? They're counting on 99% of that not even making it into your body. So they don't mind that. My problem is you've now got to manage and metabolize all of that. So I'm a big believer that more isn't always better, and the product is well designed as is. And so, there's going to be a few conditions where doubling up maybe would make sense, but we don't need to go beyond that. It's a well put together formula, as described on the label. 3 capsules a day is good. If you went to 4 or 5, that would be okay. But this isn't one that you need to overuse because it's going to deliver effectively with high absorption what it's built to do.
Excellent. Well, anything you'd like to add in for closing here on this Super Greens Plus D moment?
No, except that one of the other attributes to consider here during these winter months, some people can find themselves in a little bit of a curmudgeonly like mood when they get without their sunlight. And you put this in your body, give yourself a chance to have a little internal sun, and may even find that it helps with your mood.
So seasonal depression even can be helped with.
I don't want to try to give some kind of clinical description here. I just see a lot of people that I know they're a little down because of the weather. And we've had a lot of snow here in North Carolina for the last several days, and you get a little claustrophobic inside the house, and you're ready to see the sun, and that's a little sunshine in a bottle right there.
So if someone's being grumpy, instead of a lump of coal in their stocking, you give them Super Greens Plus D.
That is so much better, and no one would refer to you as the Grinch.
Perfect. Edward Stone, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Winder.
Another great chat.
Until next time.